the whispers of a lost world. Some places remember, long after the last breath, long after the final light fades. Some places hold memories in their bones, echoes of voices that once filled the silence, footsteps that once disturbed the dust. The Kethra Canyon was one of those places. Jack stood at its edge, wind howling through his environmental suit's external sensors, and stared into the throat of a dead world. The canyon stretched before him like a wound carved into the planet's rust-colored surface, deep, jagged, impossibly ancient. Rock formations twisted upward in shapes that defied natural erosion, as if the stone itself had been reaching for something before time froze at mid-gesture. 47 days alone. That's how long it had been since the research vessel dropped him here and disappeared beyond the atmosphere. 47 days of silence broken only by wind and the rhythmic beep of his equipment. 47 days cataloging ruins, mapping anomalies, talking to himself just to remember what his own voice sounded like. Xenoarchaeology, the frontier of human knowledge, the romantic pursuit of dead civilizations and their secrets. Nobody warned him about the loneliness. His scanner chirped, the same reading it had been giving him for 3 weeks now. Mass density anomaly, subsurface structure, artificial origin probability, 97%. 3 weeks of excavation, 3 weeks of careful brushwork and sonic imaging, 3 weeks of hoping he'd found something that mattered. Today, finally, he had his answer. The excavation site lay before him, a carefully cleared depression in the canyon floor where layers of sediment had been painstakingly removed. And rising from that depression, still half buried in compressed earth and time, stood something impossible. A statue, colossal, magnificent, utterly alien, even partially exposed. It towered 4 meters above the excavation floor, suggesting a total height of perhaps 15 meters once fully revealed. The craftsmanship stole his breath, smooth curves and elegant lines carved from a single piece of translucent crystalline stone that caught the dying light and held it, glowing faintly from within like captured moonlight. But it was the figure itself that made Jax's hands tremble. Humanoid, feminine, graceful beyond anything human sculptors had ever achieved. She stood with one hand extended, palm upward, as if offering something to whoever might find her. Her robes flowed around her form in frozen waves, each fold rendered with such precision that Jax could almost see them moving in a wind that had died millennia ago. Her face, though even half obscured by accumulated dust, her face was extraordinary. High cheekbones, a strong but delicate jawline, features that suggested intelligence, compassion, authority held lightly. Her eyes were closed, lips slightly parted as if she'd been captured mid-breath, mid-word, mid-thought. She was beautiful in a way that transcended species. Command. This is Field Station 7. Jax activated his long-range transmitter, knowing the response would take 20 minutes to arrive. I've completed primary excavation of the anomaly. Transmitting visual data now. You need to see this. His voice sounded small against the wind. He approached the statue slowly, equipment pack heavy on his shoulders, excavation tools clinking with each step. Up close, the details multiplied. Intricate patterns etched into her skin like tattoos or circuitry, symbols that might have been writing or decoration or something his human mind couldn't categorize. The crystalline material wasn't uniform. It contained striations and inclusions that resembled neural pathways or fiber optic cables. Technology and art merged so seamlessly that separation became meaningless. Jax pulled out his softest brush. The final cleaning required delicate work, removing the last layers of dust without damaging the surface. He started at her shoulder, working his way up toward her face. Each gentle stroke revealed new wonders. The texture of her robes, suggesting fabric that had never existed in material form. The individual strands of her hair, flowing back as if caught in an eternal breeze. The subtle asymmetry of her features that made her feel real rather than idealized. Hours passed. The alien sun tracked across the purple sky, casting shifting shadows through the canyon. Jax worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon, his world narrowing to the brush, the dust, the slow revelation of ancient craftsmanship. Finally, he reached her face. He cleaned her forehead, her cheeks, the bridge of her nose. Dust fell away like years dissolving, revealing skin, if it could be called skin, that seemed to shift between translucent and opaque depending on viewing angle. The symbols etched there were denser, more complex, mathematical formulas interwoven with what might have been poetry or prayers. One final area remained, her lips. Jax positioned himself directly before her, brush poised. Something in his chest tightened, anticipation or dread, he couldn't tell which. This felt significant in a way he couldn't articulate, like he stood at a threshold between what was and what might be. Who were you? He whispered to the silent stone. What were you waiting for? He made the final stroke. Dust fell away in a small cloud, revealing lips carved with impossible delicacy. And in that moment, everything changed. The air itself seemed to pause. A hum, so deep it registered as pressure rather than sound, resonated from somewhere within the statue. The ground beneath Jax's feet vibrated with a rhythm that felt almost biological. Heartbeat slow, breath deep. The crystalline material began to glow. Faint at first, then stronger. The etched symbols ignited with internal light, blue bleeding into violet, bleeding into colors that Jax's eyes couldn't quite process. The glow spread like fire through oil, racing along pathways invisible until this moment. illuminating the statue from within until she blazed against the twilight like a captured star. And deep in the canyon, where shadows pooled like spilled ink, the silence finally shattered. Something was waking up. Jax's training screamed at him to retreat, document from a safe distance, establish perimeter, follow contamination protocols. Every regulation drilled into him during 3 years of xenological certification demanded he back away from the impossible thing happening before his eyes. But his feet wouldn't move. He stood frozen, brush still clutched in his trembling hand. As the statue continued its transformation, the internal glow intensified, pulsing now, rhythmic, like bioluminescence in some deep ocean creature responding to stimuli after eons of darkness. This isn't happening, he heard himself say. Stone doesn't, matter doesn't just. The words died as the hum deepened. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was presence, a sensation of vast awareness focusing, like standing beneath the gaze of something impossibly large trying to perceive something impossibly small. Jax felt it in his bones, his blood, the electric firing of his neurons, as if the statue was reading him at a molecular level. His suit's sensors went haywire, electromagnetic fluctuations spiking across spectrums that shouldn't exist, gravitational anomalies, quantum uncertainty increasing in localized space. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the statue moved, not a mechanical grinding of stone, not the crack of brittle material stressed beyond limits, but movement, fluid, organic, impossible. Her fingers curled slightly, crystalline joints flexing with the grace of living tissue. Her head tilted, just a fraction, angling toward the figure standing before her, and her lips changed. Jax watched, mind fragmenting with the effort to process what his eyes insisted was real. The corners of her mouth lifted, slowly, deliberately, curves deepening, expression transforming from serene neutrality into something warmer, a smile, gentle, knowing, infinitely patient, as if she'd been waiting for centuries, for millennia. And now, finally, the wait was over. No. Jax stumbled backward, legs finally obeying the panic flooding his nervous system. No, this isn't. You're not. His heel caught on excavation equipment. He went down hard, magnetic boots losing purchase, landing in the dust with a grunt that expelled all air from his lungs. But even gasping, even scrambling backward like a panicked animal, he couldn't look away. The statue's eyes opened, not like shutters lifting or lenses adjusting. Her eyelids rose, crystalline tissue moving over crystalline orbs, revealing eyes that held depth and dimension impossible in carved stone. Luminous amber, flecked with gold, containing light sources that seemed to extend beyond three-dimensional space. They focused on him. Jax felt the weight of that gaze like physical pressure, not hostile, not cold, but impossibly vast, as if something ancient and incomprehensibly intelligent was looking not at him, but through him, reading his history in the quantum foam of his atoms. This is a hallucination, he gasped. Contamination. Neural degradation from isolation. I'm having a psychotic break. The statue's smile widened. And then she spoke. Not in words, nothing so crude as vibrated air-carrying phonemes, but directly into his mind, a cascade of pure meaning that bypassed language entirely. Concepts bloomed in his consciousness like flowers in time-lapse. Welcome, recognition, gratitude, sorrow, hope, all woven together in a tapestry of communication more intimate than any conversation he'd ever experienced, and beneath it all, a name, Lyra. The word, if it was a word, settled into his mind with the weight of absolute truth. Not a designation but an identity, as fundamental as the gravitational constant or the speed of light. I am Lyra. I have been waiting. You have come. Jax's mouth opened, closed. His scientific training grasped for explanations, advanced nanotechnology, suspended animation, some form of preserved consciousness interfacing with crystalline computing substrate. No, not preserved, not sleeping, waiting, different. She was reading his thoughts, responding to them in real time. The revelation should have terrified him. Instead, he felt a strange calm settling over the panic, as if her presence carried with it the assurance that terror was unnecessary. What are you? He managed aloud, voice cracking. Images flooded his mind, not chaotic, but structured, a carefully curated exhibition of memory. Vast cities of impossible architecture, towers that grew like trees from living stone, beings of ethereal grace moving through spaces where geometry bent in ways Euclidean mathematics couldn't describe. Technology indistinguishable from nature, machines that functioned through principles his education had no framework to comprehend. A civilization so advanced that humanity's greatest achievements would seem like children's toys in comparison. And at the center of it all, Lyra, not as a statue, but alive, teaching, building, creating, one of many, but distinct, important, loved. We were the Kytherii. We walked between stars. We shaped matter with intention. We sang worlds into being. Were. Jax latched onto the past tense. What happened to you? The images shifted, and suddenly Jax felt her sorrow like a knife between his ribs. Darkness, not the absence of light, but something actively anti-light, anti-matter, anti-existence. A cosmic wound spreading through their space, consuming worlds, civilizations, entire stellar systems. The Kytherii fighting, desperate, brilliant, brave, throwing everything they had against an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with or defeated. Only delayed. Cataclysm, the unmaking. It came from spaces between spaces. It consumed. It ended. We could not stop it. Only postpone. Lyra's smile faded, replaced by an expression of such profound loss that Jax felt tears streaming down his face without understanding why. We built sentinels, monuments, guardians. We encoded ourselves into eternal forms and scattered across threatened worlds, waiting, watching, hoping that one day, someone worthy would come, someone who could carry forward what we could not complete. Worthy. Jax's voice was barely a whisper. I'm nobody. A third-rate archaeologist on a dead-end survey mission. I'm not. You came. You sought. You looked at the forgotten and chose to remember. You brushed away 10,000 years of dust with gentle hands. That is worthy. The crystalline form began to change again. Not growing, but refining. As if matter was reorganizing itself at the quantum level, shedding unnecessary mass, becoming more focused, more present. The statue's proportions shifted slightly, becoming less monumental and more human scale. Still larger than life, but no longer overwhelming. Lyra, because that's what she was now, not a statue but a being, a person, an intelligence, took a step forward. The sound of crystalline feet on stone rang like music through the canyon. Wait. Jax scrambled backward. Don't. I don't. You are afraid. This is natural. Change is the most frightening force in the universe. But change is also the only path forward. She knelt, an impossible sight, this being of living stone lowering herself to his level, and extended that same hand he'd seen carved in offering. Palm up. Invitation, not demand. I have been alone for longer than your species has had language. I have waited in silence while galaxies turned. I have held the memories of an entire people who trusted me to preserve what mattered most. Her amber eyes held his, and in them, Jax saw the reflection of his own loneliness multiplied by millennia. But I cannot complete my purpose alone. The unmaking is not finished. It sleeps, as I slept, but it will wake. And when it does, this world, your world, will fall into darkness unless we act. Jax stared at her outstretched hand, at the symbols etched into her crystalline palm, at the faint glow that pulsed within her like a heartbeat made of light. He thought of Earth, of the struggling colony on this world's only habitable zone, of humanity's fragile expansion into a cosmos that didn't care whether they survived or went extinct. He thought of the loneliness that had driven him to this profession, the need to understand, to connect, to prove that meaning persisted even after death. And he thought of her smile, that impossible, beautiful smile that said, I see you, I recognize you, you matter. Slowly, fighting every self-preservation instinct, Jax reached out. Their hands touched, and the universe ignited. The moment their hands met, Jax's consciousness exploded outward. Not painfully. There was no pain, no physical sensation at all. But his awareness suddenly extended beyond the boundaries of his skull, his skin, his individual existence. He felt the planet beneath him, the slow rotation, the magnetic field, the molten core churning kilometers below. He felt the canyon, every grain of sand, every fractured stone, the patient erosion of wind measured in millennia. And he felt her. Lyra's mind was vast. Not in the sense of intelligence, though that intelligence was profound, but in duration. She had existed so long that memory had layers upon layers, sedimentary consciousness compressed under the weight of ages. Each thought connected to thousands of others, neural pathways, if they could be called that, branching through time as well as space. Do not fear. I am containing the connection. Full integration would shatter your biological matrix. This is a translation, a bridge. Her voice in his mind was clearer now, carrying nuance and emotion that the previous telepathic burst had lacked. She sounded gentle, careful, as if she was holding something incredibly delicate and didn't want to break it. What's happening? Jax gasped, though he wasn't sure if he spoke aloud or simply projected the thought. Communion. Your species calls it different things. Mind meld. Neural handshake. Psychic bond. All inadequate terms for something more fundamental, the recognition that consciousness, however it manifests, shares common architecture. Images continued flowing, but more controlled now. Curated. Lyra was showing him specific memories, chosen for comprehension rather than overwhelming him with everything at once. He saw the Kytherii at their height, hundreds of billions of individuals spread across dozens of worlds, each one unique but connected through networks of shared consciousness. Not a hive mind, each being retained fierce individuality, but something more like cosmic empathy. The ability to understand each other so completely that conflict became obsolete, cooperation became instinctive. They'd achieved post-scarcity economics millennia before developing space travel, had eliminated disease, death, suffering, not through technology alone, but through a fundamental restructuring of their relationship with reality itself. They'd learned that matter was just consciousness densely packed, that the universe was fundamentally participatory, that observation and creation were the same act seen from different angles. They'd become, in a sense, the universe's way of knowing itself. It's beautiful, Jax whispered, watching cities grow like crystalline forests, seeing art that existed in more dimensions than his brain could process, hearing music that was mathematics made audible. It was. And then the unmaking came. The vision darkened. Jax felt Lyra's reluctance to show this part, her ancient trauma surfacing despite eons of distance. But she pushed forward, determined that he understand. The unmaking wasn't an enemy in any conventional sense. It was entropy weaponized. Heat death accelerated. A cosmic eraser that moved through dimensions higher than human mathematics could describe, leaving absolutely nothing in its wake. Not ruins, not corpses, just absence. Voids in reality that hurt to perceive, spaces where existence itself had been revoked. The Kytherii had detected it approaching from intergalactic distances, had mobilized their entire civilization, had built weapons that rewrote physics, shields that held back the tide of non-being, strategies that bought them time measured in centuries, but they couldn't stop it. How does something like that even exist? Jax asked, Horror creeping through the wonder. The universe seeks balance. For every creative force, there must be an equal destructive one. We were life approaching its fullest expression. The unmaking was the equal and opposite reaction. Perhaps we grew too large, too bright. Perhaps existence itself needed to recalibrate. The memory shifted to councils of desperate beings, their luminous forms dimming as they accepted the inevitable. They couldn't win, but they could delay, could build monuments that would outlast the immediate catastrophe, could encode their knowledge, their values, their hopes into forms that might survive until the cosmic wound healed. The Sentinel program, volunteers, thousands of them, agreed to undergo transformation, to have their consciousness crystallized, embedded into constructs designed to last millions of years. Each Sentinel contained the complete cultural memory of their people, waiting in stasis until someone worthy appeared. Someone who could carry the warning forward. Someone who might prevent the next civilization from making the same mistakes, or at least help them survive the reckoning when it came. I chose this canyon, this world. Your star was young then, still surrounded by the debris disk that would become your planets. I calculated that given universal constants, life would likely emerge here. Complex life, perhaps even sapient life. So I waited. Jax saw her transformation. Lyra, beautiful and vital, stepping willingly into a crystallization chamber. Saw her physical form dissolve and reform as something between matter and energy. Saw her take her position here, in this canyon, and felt the terrible moment when her consciousness dimmed into dormancy. 10,000 years. 10,000 years of dreamless waiting. 10,000 years of trusting that eventually, someone would find her. But why me? Jax's voice cracked. Why wait for a random human archaeologist? You could have waited for, I don't know, someone important, a leader, a genius. You are here. You sought knowledge rather than treasure. You treated my form with reverence when you could have used sonic hammers or plasma cutters. You saw art before you saw artifact. She paused, and he felt something like warmth in her mental presence. And when my smile emerged from the dust, you didn't run. Fear gripped you, I felt it, but curiosity proved stronger. That is the trait of all worthy species, the ability to choose wonder over terror. The communion deepened. Lyra showed him the cosmic event she'd mentioned before, something stirring in the outer dark. Not the unmaking itself, but its echo. A fragment that had remained behind when the main force moved on, sleeping in the space between stars. Her awakening had created ripples, disturbances in the quantum substrate that would eventually draw its attention. When? Jax asked, dread settling in his stomach. 3 of your years, perhaps 4. It depends on variables I cannot perfectly predict, but it will come. And when it does, every living thing in this system will cease to exist unless we activate the resonance. The resonance. Lyra released his hand, the physical connection breaking but the mental bridge remaining, thinner but intact, and stood. She turned toward the canyon wall, raising her arm in a gesture that was both imperious and graceful. The stone responded. The canyon wall flowed, matter rearranging itself, revealing a passage that had been hidden beneath seeming solid rock. Beyond it, in darkness that her internal glow didn't quite penetrate, Jax glimpsed vast machinery. Architecture that hurt to look at directly. Technology that made his survey equipment look like stone knives. This is why I was placed here. Not just as a monument or warning, but as a key. Beneath this canyon lies a resonance engine, a device that can, if properly activated, create a field of existential affirmation so powerful that the unmaking cannot penetrate it. It will shield this system, possibly others nearby, but it requires. She turned back to him, and in her crystalline eyes, he saw desperate hope. It requires someone who understands this world, someone with recent experience of physical reality. My people were so evolved we'd become partially non-corporeal. We built the engine, but we built it for use by younger species. Species still firmly rooted in three-dimensional space. Species like yours. Jax stared at the revealed passage, at the impossible technology waiting in darkness, at the being who'd waited 10,000 years for someone, anyone, to arrive. He thought of the colony, 3,000 souls trying to build a new life under alien stars. He thought of Earth, billions unaware they'd been dead sentenced by cosmic forces beyond comprehension. He thought of the future, all the futures that would never happen if the unmaking returned. I'm a field archaeologist, he said quietly. I catalog ruins. I don't save civilizations. Neither did I. I was a teacher, a scholar. I'd never built anything more complex than educational constructs. But when my people needed volunteers, I stepped forward because, she paused, and he felt ancient emotion resonating through their connection, because someone had to, because the alternative was letting everything we'd achieved simply end, because consciousness, messy, complicated, beautiful consciousness, is too precious to surrender without a fight. She extended her hand again, not demanding, offering. I cannot activate the resonance alone, but together, your recent physical understanding combined with my ancient knowledge, we might succeed. I cannot promise success, cannot guarantee survival, but I can promise meaning. I can promise that whatever happens, we will have tried. Jax looked at her hand, at the passage, at the impossible responsibility being offered. He was 41 years old. He'd spent 20 years studying dead civilizations, convinced that understanding the past was the only meaning available in an indifferent universe. And now a living monument from that past was offering him the chance to protect the future. He'd spent 47 days alone, talking to himself, wondering if his life mattered. Here was his answer. Jax took her hand. Show me what needs to be done. Lyra's smile returned, radiant, grateful, heartbreakingly hopeful. Thank you, thank you. You will never know what your trust means to one who has waited so long in darkness. Together, hand in crystalline hand, they walked into the passage behind them. The canyon wind howled. Ahead of them, in the depths where ancient machinery stirred, their future waited. The passage descended. Not steeply, Lyra moved with careful consideration for Jax's merely human limitations, but relentlessly, spiraling down through stone that had been precisely carved millennia before his species developed written language. The walls glowed softly, responding to Lyra's presence, embedded luminescence tracking their progress like bioluminescent organisms in deep ocean trenches. Jax's suit lights were unnecessary but remained active anyway, twin beams cutting through the gloom, grounding him in familiar technology even as he walked beside something that redefined possibility. The resonance engine was built in stages. Lyra's voice echoed in his mind as they descended. First, we identified worlds with high probability of developing complex life. Then we seeded them with the necessary substrate, materials that don't exist in nature but would remain stable across geological time frames. Finally, we buried the engines deep enough to survive planetary catastrophe but accessible enough to be reached by a sufficiently advanced civilization. Or a random archaeologist with you as a guide, Jax added, breathless from the descent. He felt her mental equivalent of a smile. The universe operates on strange fulcrums. Grand designs often require small actors. The passage opened into a chamber so vast that Jax's suit lights couldn't reach the far walls. But he didn't need external illumination. The machinery provided its own. The resonance engine filled the space like a cathedral built by gods with non-Euclidean ambitions. Crystalline towers spiraled upward into darkness, connected by bridges of solidified light. Massive spheres rotated slowly in gravitational suspension, their surfaces covered in the same flowing script he'd seen on Lyra's skin. Energy conduits, visible as rivers of pale luminescence, flowed between components, carrying power generated by sources Jax couldn't identify. It was beautiful, terrifying, absolutely alien, and it was broken. Even Jax's untrained eye could see the damage. Entire sections had gone dark. Support structures showed signs of stress fractures. Some of the spheres had stopped rotating entirely, hanging motionless like dead planets in a frozen solar system. 10,000 years of planetary seismic activity, temperature fluctuation, and simple entropy had taken their toll. Oh no, the words escaped him as a whisper. Lyra, is it? Can we? The damage is extensive but not catastrophic. The Kytherii built for durability. But repairs will require knowledge I possess and physical manipulation only you can provide. My current form, while mobile, lacks the fine motor control necessary for delicate technical work. She walked, glided, really, toward the nearest tower, her luminescence reflecting off its surface. Reaching out, she placed her palm against it. The tower's inscriptions flared to life, cascading characters racing across its surface too fast for Jax to track. Diagnostic complete. Primary resonance chambers, functional. Secondary harmonic amplifiers, 3 failed, 7 degraded. Substrate integration, 73%. Quantum entanglement network, offline. Power distribution, critical but stable. She turned to him, and he saw worry in her crystalline features. We have perhaps 3 months of continuous work ahead of us, and we have 3 years before the Unmaking's echo arrives. That should be sufficient, if nothing interferes. What could interfere? Your people. They will have questions about where you've gone, about what you've found, about me. As if summoned by prophecy, Jax's long-range communicator crackled to life, the first time it had received signal since entering the passage. The voice that emerged was sharp with barely controlled panic. Field Station 7, this is Orbital Command. Jax, we've been trying to reach you for 6 hours. Your telemetry showed you entering an underground structure and then, nothing. Report status immediately. Over. Jax looked at Lyra. She looked back, expression unreadable. What will you tell them? The truth, Jax said quietly. They deserve that much. He activated his transmitter. Orbital Command. This is Field Station 7. Status, functional. I've made contact with a non-human intelligence. Ancient, benevolent. And we have a situation. Silence stretched across 20 minutes of light speed lag. Then, Station 7, repeat last transmission. Did you say non-human intelligence? Over the next hour, Jax explained everything. The statue, the awakening, Lyra's nature, the unmaking, the resonance engine, the impending threat. He kept his voice steady, clinical, falling back on scientific training even as he described phenomena that shattered every assumption that training was built on. The response, when it came, was predictable. Station 7, maintain position. Do not, repeat, do not proceed with any activation of alien technology. A full science team and security detachment will be dispatched immediately. ETA. 14 days. Acknowledge. Jax closed his eyes. Command. We don't have 14 days to wait. The repairs need to begin. Station 7. Those are direct orders. You are not qualified to assess the risks of alien technology. Maintain position and await relief. Command out. The transmission ended. Jax stood in the glow of ancient machinery, feeling the weight of institutional caution crushing possibilities. He understood their concern. First contact protocols existed for good reasons. Uncontrolled activation of alien technology had destroyed entire expeditions in humanity's brief history of space exploration. But those protocols assumed you had time. They don't believe. Lyra's mental voice carried resignation. How could they? They've never seen the unmaking, never felt its approach like I have. To them, this is just another archaeological find. Interesting but not urgent. I can convince them, Jax said. Not sure he believed it himself. I can make them understand. In 14 days, perhaps. But what of the days after? They will want to study me, contain me, test the engine's every component before permitting activation. That is the nature of cautious species. They hesitate. And in cosmic terms, hesitation and extinction are often synonymous. She moved closer, her crystalline form reflecting his suit lights in fragments of captured rainbow. I do not ask you to defy your people, but I ask you to consider, what is the greater risk, acting without full consensus, or waiting for consensus while annihilation approaches? Jax thought of the colony. 3,000 souls who'd left Earth seeking new beginnings. Thought of the children born under alien stars who knew no other home. Thought of the message he'd have to send if he did nothing. Sorry, everyone. I found the means to save you, but procedure required I wait for permission that came too late. If we do this, he said slowly, if we proceed without authorization, I'll be court-martialed, stripped of credentials, possibly imprisoned. Yes, my career will be over. Yes, everything I've worked for, gone. Lyra placed her hand on his shoulder, the touch surprisingly gentle despite her crystalline nature. I spent 10,000 years in darkness, Jax. I surrendered my physical form, my life, my future. I accepted becoming a monument so that perhaps, impossibly, someone like you might one day have a future worth living. Your career is precious. I understand its loss would wound you, but compared to the extinction of billions, she didn't finish, didn't need to. Jax looked at the resonance engine, at its broken pieces waiting for repair, at the 3 years they had to work, and the 14 days command wanted him to wait before even beginning. He thought about meaning, about purpose, about the difference between a life spent following rules and a life spent actually mattering. Okay, he heard himself say. Okay, show me what needs to be done. Relief flooded through their mental connection, so intense it almost buckled his knees. Thank you, I swear to you, I will make this worth the sacrifice. Just, help me not get everyone killed, Jack said, attempting humor to mask his terror. That is precisely my intention. She guided him to the nearest damaged component, a crystalline sphere the size of a ground vehicle, its surface etched with incomprehensible mathematics. As she explained what needed to be done, using concepts that barely translated into human language, Jax began to understand the magnitude of the task ahead. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Jax stopped tracking time by the colony calendar, instead measuring progress in components repaired, systems brought online, incremental victories against entropy. The resonance chamber became his world, a cathedral of alien technology where he worked with hands calloused and scarred, guided by a consciousness 10,000 years old that spoke equations like poetry. Lower. 3 millimeters lower. The quantum substrate requires precise alignment or the harmonic cascade will collapse upon itself. Jax adjusted the crystalline filament with micron-level precision, holding his breath despite the suit's regulated atmosphere. Sweat stung his eyes. His muscles screamed from hours of maintaining the awkward position. But the filament clicked into place, and suddenly the entire tower section blazed with light. Yes, he fell backward, exhausted, watching energy flow through pathways that had been dark for millennia. That's the 7th amplifier. 7 down, 3 to go. You learn quickly. Lyra's presence in his mind had become familiar now, not intrusive but companionable, like working alongside a brilliant colleague who happened to communicate through telepathy. Your species has excellent spatial reasoning, far better than the Kithariai at comparable technological development. Evolution on a high-gravity world with complex tool use, Jax replied, reciting xenological theory while his hands checked the next component. We had to be good at manipulating physical objects or we'd never have survived. Perhaps. Or perhaps you simply refuse to accept limitations. I've been observing, when faced with a problem, humans don't ask, is this possible? You ask, how can I make this possible? It's simultaneously your greatest strength and most dangerous liability. Jax laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the vast chamber. You've pretty accurately described my entire career. Orbital Command had stopped trying to reach him after the first week. Too much interference from the engine's electromagnetic output, he suspected. Or perhaps they'd written him off as lost or mad or both. Either way, the silence was both liberating and terrifying. He was committed now. No turning back. Break. You need rest. Lyra's mental voice carried gentle insistence. Your biological system shows signs of stress. Cortisol levels elevated. Muscle fatigue approaching critical thresholds. You're no use to me. Collapsed. I'm fine. You're exhausted. Rest. That's not a suggestion. Despite his protests, Jax found himself trudging to his makeshift camp at the chamber's edge, a bedroll, portable stove, and dwindling supplies. He'd been rationing for weeks, knowing that requesting a resupply would mean explaining where he'd gone and why. He collapsed onto the bedroll, intending to rest just minutes, but sleep claimed him instantly, dragging him down into dreams of flowing light and crystalline mathematics. When he woke, hours later, judging by his suit's chronometer, he found Lyra sitting nearby, not in meditation or standby, but simply, sitting, watching him with those luminous amber eyes. Do you sleep? He asked groggily. Not as you understand it, but I do. Pause. Reflect. Process. My consciousness requires occasional defragmentation, to borrow a term from your computational technology. I've been processing memories of my old world, comparing them to yours, and you're more chaotic than we ever were, more violent, more short-sighted, but also, she paused, and he felt something like wonder through their connection. Also more vibrant, more alive. We'd eliminated suffering, but in doing so, we'd also diminished joy. You live with such intensity because you know life is brief. Every moment matters because you don't have infinite moments. There's a beauty in that we'd forgotten. Jax sat up, accepting the meal ration Lyra had somehow retrieved from his supplies, crystalline hands proving surprisingly deft at manipulating human packaging. You sound almost envious, he said. Perhaps I am. We achieved immortality and lost mortality's gifts, urgency, passion, the desperate need to mean something before the ending. You still have that. Still burn with it. Working with you these past months, feeling your determination even when exhausted, your refusal to surrender even when hopeless. She looked away, and the glow within her dimmed slightly. I had forgotten what that felt like, to be alive rather than merely existing. Jax studied her profile, the elegant lines, the alien yet familiar features. Over the weeks, she'd become less crystalline monument and more person. He'd learned her moods, the way her internal light pulsed faster when excited, dimmed when concerned, shifted to cooler spectrums when analytical. He'd learned to interpret her silences, understand the nuances of her telepathic tone. She was brilliant, yes, ancient beyond comprehension, absolutely, but also lonely, uncertain, hopeful in a way that was almost painful to witness. Lyra, he said quietly, what happens after? If we succeed? When we succeed, what do you do? Where do you go? She was silent for a long moment. I don't know. I was built to wait, to warn, to help activate the resonance. But after, I never let myself imagine an after. The mission was all that mattered. All that justified the sacrifice. You could come back with me, to the colony, to Earth, eventually. Your living history, the things you know, what you could teach us. I would be a specimen, an artifact, studied, contained, questioned endlessly. I've accepted worse fates, but she turned to him, and the vulnerability in her expression made his heart ache. What I want, what I've begun to want these past months, is to continue this, working beside someone who sees me as a person rather than a monument. I want. She struggled with the concept, and he felt her fishing through his memories for the right word. Partnership, is that the term? Two individuals choosing to face uncertainty together rather than alone. Yeah, Jax said softly. That's exactly the term. Their eyes met, held, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a connection deeper than telepathy or shared purpose. Recognition, not of species or form, but of something more fundamental. Two lonely souls who'd found each other across an impossible divide and decided that maybe, just maybe, the universe was less cold because of it. When this is over, Lyra said slowly, if you would have me, I would like to stay, to see your sun rise, to meet your people, to continue learning what it means to be alive again. I'd like that too, Jax replied. I'd like that very much. A alert suddenly blared through his suit, proximity warning. Something approaching the chamber. Something large. Jax was on his feet instantly, Lyra beside him, both facing the passage they'd entered through weeks ago. Command finally sent that team, Jax said grimly. Or something else. The Unmaking's echo is still years distant, but it may have sent probes, scouts, fragments of itself to investigate the disturbance. They waited, tense, as the approaching presence grew closer. Then a voice, human, female, amplified through suit speakers, echoed into the chamber. Jax, are you alive? Answer me, you stubborn idiot. Relief and apprehension warred in Jax's chest. He recognized that voice. Dr. Sarah Chen, chief xenobiologist, colleague, friend, and someone who absolutely would not approve of anything he'd done. Here, he called back. I'm here, and you need to see something. Sarah emerged from the passage, suited and accompanied by 3 security personnel with weapons drawn. Holy shit, she whispered. Jax, what have you done? The necessary thing. Lyra's voice resonated, not just in Jax's mind, but in all their minds, a telepathic broadcast that made the security team stumble backward in alarm. And if you value the lives you've built on this world, you will help us finish it. Sarah's hand went to her sidearm. Everyone stay calm. Jax, step away from the... No. Jax positioned himself beside Lyra. Sarah, listen, I know how this looks. I know I've violated about 40 regulations, but in 3 years, something is coming that will end everything. And this, he gestured to the engine, is our only chance. You've been down here for 2 months. Sarah's voice cracked with worry and anger. You've missed every check-in. Command thinks you're dead or compromised. They're preparing to declare this site restricted and they'll doom us, Lyra interjected. The Unmaking does not negotiate, does not delay, does not offer second chances. We have work to complete. You can help or leave, but do not interfere. The security team raised weapons. Sarah's hand tightened on her pistol. For a terrible moment, Jax thought it would all end here, in violence and fear and missed chances. Then Sarah looked, really looked, at the resonance engine, at its scale, its complexity, its obvious purpose. Show me, she said finally, holstering her weapon. Show me everything. And this better be the most convincing explanation in human history, Jax, because if you're wrong, then we're all dead anyway. Jax finished. So let's make sure I'm right. Over the next hours, they shared everything. Lyra opened her memories to Sarah, showing the Unmaking, the Kithariai, the desperate gambit that had placed her here. Jax walked them through the repairs, the progress, the 3 remaining systems that needed activation. Slowly, impossibly, Sarah began to believe. I need to report this, she said finally, but I'll recommend they send more help rather than interference. Jax, she gripped his shoulder. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most insane. Possibly both. Definitely both, Jax agreed. As Sarah and her team departed to make their report, Jax and Lyra returned to work. But something had changed. The isolation was breaking. Help was coming. They had a chance. Thank you, Lyra said quietly, for risking everything, for trusting me when you had every reason not to, for being someone worth waiting 10,000 years to meet. Jax smiled, returning to his repairs with renewed energy. Thank me when we save the galaxy. Above them, the resonance engine blazed brighter. Ahead of them, 3 years of uncertain future waited, but they would face it together. And somehow, that made all the difference. The day the Unmaking's echo arrived, the sky turned the color of dying stars. Jax stood on the canyon's edge, 3 years older, countless scars wiser, watching the heavens bleed colors that shouldn't exist. Beside him, Lyra's crystalline form gleamed against the cosmic wrongness spreading across the atmosphere, a beacon of affirmation against approaching negation. Behind them, the resonance engine thrummed with full power for the first time in 10 millennia. It's beautiful, Jax whispered, even as dread curled in his stomach. Terrifying, but beautiful. Beauty and terror are often inseparable at cosmic scales, Lyra replied, her mental voice steady despite what he knew she must be feeling. The unmaking is elegant in its way. Entropy achieving consciousness. The universe's immune system responding to excessive order. The colony had been evacuated to underground shelters. 3 years of preparation, convincing skeptical authorities, marshalling resources, explaining to 3,000 terrified colonists why they needed to trust an ancient alien intelligence and a disgraced archaeologist who'd violated every protocol, but they'd done it. The engine was ready. Whether it would work remained to be seen. Status. Jax sub-vocalized into his comm. Sarah's voice crackled back from the command bunker. All systems nominal. Power output at maximum. Quantum entanglement network stable. Jax, it's now or never. Together. Lyra extended her hand, the same gesture she'd offered 3 years ago, when everything had changed. Together. Jax confirmed, taking it. Their minds merged, practiced now, effortless, two consciousness moving in synchronized harmony. Through Lyra, he felt the engine's vast complexity. Every component they painstakingly repaired singing in harmonic resonance. Through Jax, she felt the physical world with an immediacy her purely crystalline form couldn't achieve, grounding abstract physics in concrete reality. Initiating primary cascade. Light erupted from the canyon, pure, white, reality-affirming light that rose like a pillar into the diseased sky. The resonance engine's output, amplified through substrate the Kytherii had seeded across the planet's crust, creating a field that didn't just shield but actively insisted that this space, this world, these lives had the right to continue existing. The unmaking's echo struck. Jax felt it through their connection, a sensation beyond pain, beyond fear. It was rawness made manifest, the feeling of standing at the edge of an infinite void and realizing the void was looking back with hungry interest. Reality itself grew thin, matter trembling on the edge of dissolution. But the resonance held. Light met darkness. Affirmation met negation. Two cosmic forces, one ancient beyond measure, one newly awakened, locked in struggle that made the air scream and the ground buckle. It's too strong, Lyra's thought carried desperation. The fragment is larger than I calculated, more coherent. The engine is holding but, then give it more power. Jax shouted aloud. Everything we have, that will drain the core. Burn out systems that can't be repaired. The engine will be useless if we're all dead. Do it. A moment of hesitation. Then Lyra's presence surged through their connection with something that felt like grim determination. Very well. But know this, Jax. The engine requires a consciousness to direct it, a mind to give shape to its output. I was meant to serve that function, but at full power. Understanding crashed through him like ice water. No, there has to be another way. There isn't. I've run the calculations 1,000 times. At this output level, the feedback will crystallize whatever consciousness is channeling it. I will become part of the engine, permanently. It's the only way to. I won't let you sacrifice yourself, and I won't let your people die. The unmaking pressed closer. In the sky, stars began winking out, not obscured, but erased, removed from reality as if they'd never existed. The colony's shield sparked with corrosive energy. Jax, listen to me. Lyra's mental voice softened. I've existed for 10,000 years, waited in darkness so long that I'd forgotten what hope felt like. These past 3 years, working beside you, learning your world, discovering that loneliness can end, they've been the most alive I've felt since my transformation. Then don't leave. Tears streamed down his face. We'll find another way. There is no other way. But this isn't an ending, Jax. It's a transformation. I'll become part of this world's defense. A permanent guardian. Every sunrise, every child born, every moment of beauty that continues because we acted, I'll be part of that. And you. He felt her attention focus, felt the weight of 10 millennia of accumulated wisdom and affection settling on him like a blessing. You gave me 3 years of meaning. Let me give you a lifetime of safety. She didn't wait for permission. The engine's output surged, power increasing beyond theoretical maximums, and Lyra channeled it all. Jax felt her consciousness expanding, stretching, beginning to dissolve into the harmonic field that now enveloped the entire planet. No, Lyra, please, remember me, she whispered. Remember that consciousness, however it manifests, is precious. Remember that 10,000 years is nothing compared to one moment of genuine connection. Remember, the resonance engine achieved critical resonance. Light exploded outward in a wave that swept across the planet, into orbit, beyond the atmosphere into the dark between worlds. It struck the unmaking's echo with force that registered on seismic monitors as far away as the colony's polar station. And the echo retreated, not destroyed. Such things couldn't be destroyed, but repelled. Driven back into the spaces between stars, forced into dormancy by a shield of pure existential affirmation that would persist for millennia. The planet was safe. The colony was safe. Humanity had survived to continue its fumbling journey toward whatever future awaited. But Lyra. Jax collapsed to his knees at the canyon's edge, feeling her presence fragmenting across the resonance field. Not dying, she was beyond death, but diffusing, becoming something more vast and less individual. A consciousness distributed across planetary scales, awareness without focus, existence without person. Lyra, he screamed into the suddenly silent air. Lyra. For a moment, nothing, just the wind and the fading glow of the engine's light. Then, impossibly faint, a whisper in his mind. Smile, Jax. I want my last memory to be your smile. He looked up, vision blurred with tears, and saw her. Not physically. Her crystalline form stood motionless in the canyon below, a statue once more. But in the energy patterns surrounding the planet, in the way light refracted through the atmosphere, in the quantum probability fields that now shielded them all, she was there. Diffuse, distributed, but present. And in that presence, he felt it. Warmth, gratitude, peace, and love. Simple, pure, transcendent love that required no words because it existed in the space where consciousness touched consciousness and recognized itself. Jack smiled. Despite his grief, despite the hollow ache in his chest where her focused presence used to reside, he smiled, because she'd asked him to, and because it was the last gift he could give. Thank you, for everything, for being, worth, waiting, for. The presence faded to background radiation, still there, always there, woven into the fabric of the world she died to protect. But no longer personal, no longer her in any way he could touch. She was gone. Jax knelt there as the sky returned to normal colors, as Sarah's voice crackled through the calm with reports of success and survival, as the colony emerged from shelters to find their world intact. They'd won. At a cost he'd spend the rest of his life processing. Epilogue. 5 years later, the memorial stood in the canyon where everything had begun. Not a statue, Lyra's original form remained untouched, protected now as the most sacred site on the planet. But nearby, human colonists had erected their own monument, a pillar of polished stone inscribed with her name and a simple message. She waited 10,000 years in darkness so that we might see one more dawn. We will remember. Jax visited weekly, bringing flowers that hadn't existed on this world before human arrival. Ironic, perhaps, honoring an alien savior with earth blooms. But Lyra would have appreciated the symbolism. He'd become something of a reluctant hero, the archaeologist who'd saved humanity by trusting an ancient alien intelligence. Universities offered professorships. Governments wanted consultations. Media requested interviews. He turned them all down. Instead, he worked, training new xenoarchaeologists, teaching the next generation to approach dead civilizations with reverence rather than mere curiosity. Then that behind every artifact was a person, a life, a consciousness that had mattered. Some nights, when the planet's twin moons rose over the canyon, he thought he felt her. A whisper in the wind, a warmth in the resonance field. Nothing he could prove, nothing he could share, but real enough to him. I miss you, he said to the empty air, knowing she couldn't answer but needing to speak anyway. Every day, I miss you, but you'd be proud, I think. We're learning, growing, becoming the kind of species worth saving. The wind carried no response, but above him, the stars shone clear and bright, every single one preserved because an ancient being had chosen sacrifice over surrender, had transformed monument into guardian, had proved that love could bridge even 10,000 years of separation. Jax touched the memorial stone, feeling the inscription beneath his fingers. We will remember. I will remember, he promised. Always. And in the quantum fields that surrounded the world, in the harmonic resonance that kept the darkness at bay, in the space between atoms where consciousness touched the fabric of reality, someone smiled.